They found him 3 days after the crash, half buried in snow with a body temperature that should have killed him hours ago. But Kyle Varon wasn't dead. He was waiting for something the mountains hadn't sent yet. This is the story of a man cast out by his own kind, hunted by those who feared what he carried inside, and saved by the one alpha powerful enough to either protect him or destroy him. It's a story about survival when the cold isn't the worst thing trying to kill you. If you want to see how an outcast becomes the most dangerous force in the wilderness, stay until the end. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world tonight, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where this story reaches. Hit that like button and let's begin. The headlights died first. Cale's hands tightened on the wheel as the dashboard went dark, every warning light blinking out in unison like something had reached into the guts of the truck and yanked the life out of it. The engine coughed once, twice, then nothing. Just the hiss of snow against the windshield and the low moan of wind cutting through the mountain pass. No, not now. His voice came out rough, barely louder than the storm. He pumped the brake pedal. Nothing. The truck was still moving, coasting on momentum and ice, and the road ahead curved sharp to the left. Kyle could feel the wheels losing grip, that sickening slide that meant he had maybe 2 seconds before physics took over completely. He cranked the wheel hard. The truck lurched, fishtailed, and then the rear end swung out wide. For a moment he thought he had it. Then the shoulder gave way beneath him, and the world tilted. The impact came in waves. First the front bumper slamming into something solid, then the roll, glass exploding inward, metal screaming as the roof caved and the truck tumbled down the embankment. Cale's head cracked against the side window. His ribs took a hit from the seatbelt. Everything spun, white and black and red, until the truck finally came to rest on its side in a drift 20 feet below the road. Silence. Kyle lay there, breath coming in shallow gasps, tasting blood. His left arm was pinned under his body, and when he tried to move it, pain shot up to his shoulder like someone had set the bone on fire. Broken, maybe. Dislocated at minimum. He forced himself to breathe through it, slow and steady, the way he'd learned when he was 12 and his father had locked him in the cellar for 3 days to teach him discipline. The cold came next. It seeped in through the broken windows, crawled under his jacket, wrapped around his chest like a living thing. He could already feel his fingers going numb. He had to move. Kyle braced his good arm against the dashboard and shoved himself upright. The truck groaned but held. He kicked out the remaining glass in the windshield, ignoring the fresh cuts on his boots, and dragged himself through the opening. Snow immediately bit into his face, his neck. Everywhere the skin was exposed. The wind was worse than he'd thought, gusting hard enough to knock him sideways as he stumbled away from the wreck. He looked back at the road. It was barely visible through the storm, just a dark line cutting across the white. No headlights. No one coming. He was alone. Nothing new about that. Cale pulled his jacket tighter and started walking. Not up toward the road. He'd never make that climb with a busted arm and the storm getting worse. Instead, he headed downslope, into the trees, where at least the wind wouldn't strip the skin off his face. His boots sank into the snow with every step, each one harder than the last. His ribs screamed. His arm hung useless at his side. Didn't matter. He'd survived worse. He thought about the last time he'd been this cold. 6 years ago, the night they'd exiled him. The pack had gathered in the clearing under a sky so clear you could see every star, and the alpha, his alpha once, had stood in front of him with a face like carved stone and said the words that ended everything. "You are no longer one of us." Kyle had stood there, 17 years old and shaking, not from fear, but from the effort it took to keep the power inside him from breaking loose. He'd felt it even then, coiled and waiting, something vast and old that lived in his bones and didn't care about pack law or hierarchy or anything human. The alpha had seen it too. That's why Kyle had to go. "You were born wrong," the alpha had said, "and wrong things don't belong here." They'd stripped him of his name rights, his bloodline, everything that connected him to the pack. Then they'd turned their backs and walked away, leaving him alone in the snow with nothing but the clothes he was wearing and a warning. If he ever came back, they'd kill him. He hadn't gone back. Instead, he'd done what exiles do. He'd learned to survive in the cracks between worlds. Human work, human towns, human rules. He drove trucks through mountain passes in the winter because the pay was good and no one asked questions. He kept his head down, his mouth shut, and his power buried so deep even he could barely feel it most days. Most days. Tonight was different. Tonight the power was awake, humming under his skin like a second heartbeat, and he didn't know why. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the crash. Or maybe it was something else, something the storm had carried down from the high peaks where the old magic still lived. Kyle stopped walking. His legs were shaking. His vision was starting to blur at the edges, and he knew what that meant. Hypothermia. He had maybe an hour before his body started shutting down, maybe less. He needed shelter, fire, something. The trees around him were dense, their branches heavy with snow. He could hear things moving out there in the dark. Animals, probably. Deer or elk. Maybe a bear if he was unlucky. He reached for the knife on his belt and found it still there, cold metal against his palm. It wasn't much, but it was something. He kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because that's what you did when stopping meant dying. The forest grew darker as he went deeper, the storm sounds muffled by the dense canopy overhead. His thoughts were starting to scatter, slipping away before he could hold on to them. He knew that was bad, knew he needed to stay sharp, but it was getting harder with each step. His boot caught on something buried under the snow, a root maybe, or a rock, and he went down hard on his knees. The impact jarred his ribs and sent fresh pain lancing through his arm. For a moment he just knelt there, head bowed, breathing hard through gritted teeth. Get up, he told himself, get up or you're done. But his body wasn't listening anymore. The cold had worked its way too deep, settling into his bones, his blood, his brain. His muscles felt like they were made of lead. Even the simple act of standing seemed impossible. He thought about his mother then, for the first time in years. She'd died when he was 8, before the power had manifested, before everything went wrong. Sometimes he wondered if she'd known what he would become, if she'd seen it in him even then, that spark of something that didn't belong in the ordered world of pack hierarchy and tradition. "You're special, Kyle," she used to say, tucking him in at night. "Don't ever let them make you forget that." He'd forgotten anyway. Had to. Being special in a pack meant being a target. A sound pulled him out of the memory, something moving through the trees to his left, not the cautious steps of a deer or the heavy shuffle of a bear. This was deliberate, measured, coming closer. Kyle's hand went to his knife, but his fingers were too numb to grip it properly. The shape materialized out of the snow like a ghost. A wolf. Massive, with dark fur and eyes that reflected the dim light. It stopped about 10 feet away, watching him with an intensity that made Kyle's breath catch. Pack wolves didn't come this far into the mountains. This was wild territory, neutral ground. But the way this one was looking at him, there was intelligence there, recognition even, like it knew exactly what he was. "Go on," Kyle said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not worth the trouble." The wolf didn't move, just kept staring at him with those unnerving eyes. Then, slowly, it sat down in the snow, waiting. Kyle's chest tightened. He'd heard stories about this, whispered among the pack when he was young. Stories about the wild ones, the wolves that answered to no alpha, no territory, no law but their own. Stories about how they sometimes appeared to those who were dying, watching the moment when life slipped away. "Not yet," Kyle said. He forced himself to stand using a tree trunk for support. His legs shook but held. "I'm not done yet." The wolf tilted its head, almost like it was amused. Then it stood and started walking, glancing back over its shoulder like it expected Kyle to follow. He should have been suspicious, should have known better than to trust a wild wolf in the middle of a blizzard. But something in his gut told him this was his only chance, so he followed. The wolf moved slowly, adjusting its pace so Kyle could keep up, leading him deeper into the forest. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Kyle's world had narrowed to the next step, the next breath, the dark shape of the wolf ahead of him. His mind was floating now, disconnected from his body, and he knew that was the final stage. Soon he'd start feeling warm. Then he'd lie down in the snow and never get up. But the wolf kept walking, and Kyle kept following, and then suddenly there was light ahead, gold and warm, cutting through the snow like a beacon. The wolf stopped at the edge of a small clearing and looked back at Kyle one last time. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees, silent as it had come. Kyle stumbled forward into the clearing and saw the source of the light, a black SUV, sleek and expensive, idling with its headlights on. The kind of vehicle you didn't see on mountain roads unless someone very rich or very dangerous was driving it. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, and Kyle's first thought was Alpha, not Pack. He could tell that immediately. The scent was wrong, sharper, layered with something that made Kyle's instincts go quiet and watchful. But the presence was unmistakable. This was someone used to control, used to being obeyed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Kyle made in a month. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that locked onto Kyle like a predator spotting wounded prey. "You're the crash," the man said. His voice was low, controlled, with an edge that suggested he didn't waste words. "Saw the wreck up on the road. Wasn't sure anyone walked away from that." Kyle tried to answer, but his throat had locked up. He took another step forward and his legs gave out. The man moved fast, crossing the distance in 3 strides and catching Kyle before he hit the ground. "Easy," the man said, his grip firm and steady. "I've got you." Kyle wanted to pull away, wanted to tell this stranger to back off, but his body had other ideas. The warmth radiating from the man was too good, too necessary, and Kyle found himself leaning into it despite every instinct screaming at him not to trust this. "How long have you been out here, ye?" the man asked, already half carrying Kyle toward the SUV. "Don't. No." The words came out slurred. "Hour, maybe more." Christ. The man's jaw tightened. "You're lucky you're still breathing." He opened the back door and maneuvered Kyle inside with surprising gentleness. The interior was warm, blessedly warm, and Kyle slumped against the leather seats with a sound that was half groan, half sigh of relief. The man slid in beside him, already pulling a thick blanket from somewhere and wrapping it around Kyle's shoulders. "Name's Ronan," he said, his hands quick and efficient as he assessed the damage, checking Kyle's pulse, looking at his pupils, carefully prodding at his injured arm. "Ronan Blackridge. What's yours?" "KL." It was all he could manage. "Just KL?" "Yeah." Ronan's eyes narrowed slightly, like he'd heard something in Kyle's tone that interested him. But he didn't push. Instead, he reached into the front seat and came back with a thermos. "Drink this, slowly." Kyle tried to take it, but his fingers wouldn't close properly. They just sort of fumbled at the metal, numb and useless. Ronan's expression shifted. Not pity exactly, but something close to concern, and he guided the thermos to Kyle's lips himself. "Small sips," Ronan said. The liquid inside was hot, some kind of broth or tea, and it burned going down, but Kyle didn't care. It was warm. That was all that mattered. He drank until Ronan pulled the thermos away. "Your arm's dislocated," Ronan said, his tone matter of fact. "Ribs are probably cracked. You need a hospital." "No hospitals." That wasn't a request. Kyle forced himself to meet Ronan's eyes. "I said no." For a long moment they stared at each other. Kyle could feel the weight of Ronan's presence pressing down on him, that alpha dominance that demanded submission, that expected obedience as a natural law. Most people would have caved immediately. Most people would have looked away, nodded, done whatever this man told them to do. But Kyle had stopped submitting to alphas 6 years ago. He held Ronan's gaze, steady and unflinching, even though every cell in his body was screaming at him to back down. Because this wasn't about pride or stubbornness. This was about survival. The moment he started taking orders from an alpha again was the moment he lost himself completely. Something shifted in the air between them. Ronan's expression didn't change, but his posture relaxed fractionally, like he'd just reassessed the situation and come to a different conclusion. "You're not Pack," Ronan said finally. It wasn't a question. "No." "But you're not human either." Kale didn't answer. He didn't need to. Whatever Ronan was, he could clearly sense it, that thing inside Kyle that didn't fit into neat categories, that marked him as other even among others. "I have a place not far from here," Ronan said after a moment. "You can stay there until the storm passes. Get patched up. Then you can leave if you want. Why would you do that? Do what? Help me. You don't know me. Ronan's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. Maybe I'm curious. Cale didn't believe that for a second, but he was cold, hurt, and out of options. And something about Ronan, something he couldn't quite name, made him want to stay, at least long enough to figure out what the hell was going on. Fine, he said. But I'm gone the second the road's clear. Understood. Ronan climbed into the driver's seat and put the SUV in gear. The vehicle moved smoothly through the snow, and Kyle leaned his head against the window, watching the trees slide past. His mind was still foggy, thoughts drifting in and out, but one thing was clear. This was a mistake. Getting involved with someone like Ronan Blackridge, letting himself be taken to some unknown location, trusting a stranger who radiated power, like most people radiated body heat. It was all a massive, terrible mistake. But the alternative was freezing to death alone in the forest, so maybe it was the best mistake he could make right now. The drive took longer than Kyle expected. 20 minutes, maybe 30. He lost track of time, drifting in and out of consciousness as the warmth of the SUV and the exhaustion of the day caught up with him. When he opened his eyes again, they were pulling up to a house that made his breath catch. It wasn't a house. It was an architectural statement, all glass and dark wood and clean lines, built into the side of the mountain like it had been carved from the rock itself. Lights glowed warm behind floor-to-ceiling windows, and through them Cale could see expensive furniture, polished floors, the kind of space that belonged in a magazine spread. You live here? The words came out before he could stop them. Sometimes, Ronan said, parking near the entrance. I have places in the city too, but I prefer this one. Of course he did. Men like Ronan Blackridge probably had properties scattered across 3 continents. Ronan came around and helped Kyle out of the SUV. This time Kyle didn't fight it. His legs were steadier than before, but his arm had started throbbing in a way that made his stomach turn, and he knew from experience that meant the adrenaline was wearing off, and the real pain was about to start. Inside, the house was even more impressive. High ceilings that made the space feel vast and open. Modern furniture that looked uncomfortable but probably cost a fortune. Everything spotless and precisely arranged, like Ronan employed a team of people just to keep the place camera-ready. Through here, Ronan said, guiding Kyle down a hallway to a bedroom on the ground floor. The room was large and warm, dominated by a bed that looked like it could sleep 4 people comfortably. There was a bathroom attached, Kyle noticed, and a door that probably led to a closet. The windows looked out onto the forest, currently obscured by falling snow. Sit, Ronan said, pointing to the bed. Kyle sat. His body was running on fumes now, exhaustion hitting him in waves. He watched as Ronan left and returned with what looked like a professional medical kit, the kind EMTs carried, not the little box of Band-Aids most people kept in their bathroom. You do this often? Cale asked as Ronan set the kit down and started cutting away his jacket sleeve with a pair of trauma shears. More than I'd like, Ronan said. He worked with practiced efficiency, peeling back the fabric to expose Kyle's shoulder. Your arm's dislocated, not broken. I can put it back, but it's going to hurt. Just do it. Ronan met his eyes. You sure? Because I said do it. Ronan nodded. He positioned himself carefully, one hand gripping Kyle's forearm, the other braced against his shoulder. On 3. 1, 2. He pulled on 2, not 3. The joint popped back into place with a wet sound that made Kyle's vision white out. Pain exploded through his shoulder, down his arm, up into his neck. He bit down hard on the inside of his cheek, tasting blood, refusing to make a sound even though every nerve in his body was screaming. Done, Ronan said. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Breathe through it. Kyle breathed. Slowly the pain receded from blinding to merely terrible. He became aware of Ronan's hands again, gentle now, wrapping his arm and securing it against his chest with a sling. Keep it immobilized for at least a week, Ronan said. The ribs will heal on their own if you don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Fighting, running, sudden movements of any kind. Cale almost laughed. So basically everything I do. Then I guess you'll have to stay still for once. Ronan finished with the sling and started checking Kael's ribs, his touch clinical but not rough. Any trouble breathing? No more than usual. Coughing up blood? Not yet. Good. Means they're probably just cracked, not broken. Ronan stepped back, studying him. You should get out of those wet clothes. There's a shower through there if you can manage it. I'll bring you something dry to wear. He left before Kael could respond. Kael sat there for a moment, listening to the sound of footsteps fading down the hall, then carefully stood and made his way to the bathroom. The shower was a struggle. Everything was a struggle, with one arm strapped to his chest and ribs that protested every movement. But the hot water felt like heaven, washing away the blood and the cold and the grime of the day. Kael stood under the spray until his skin turned pink and the bathroom filled with steam. When he finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was probably worth more than his truck, he found clean clothes laid out on the bed. Sweatpants, a thermal shirt, thick socks. All of them too big for him. Ronan was broader through the shoulders, taller, but they were warm and dry, and that was all that mattered. Getting dressed with one arm was its own special kind of hell, but Kael managed. By the time he was done, Ronan had returned with a tray of food: soup, bread, water. Simple, but hot. Eat, Ronan said, setting the tray on the nightstand. Kael sat on the edge of the bed and reached for the soup. His hand shook slightly, but at least his fingers were working again. The soup was chicken broth with vegetables, nothing fancy, but it tasted better than anything he'd eaten in recent memory. He finished the entire bowl without speaking, aware of Ronan watching him from a chair by the window. So, Ronan said when the bowl was empty, you going to tell me what you were really doing out there? Kael set the bowl down carefully. I told you, truck driving. Through a mountain pass in the middle of a blizzard. The pay was good. Nobody pays that good. Ronan leaned forward, his eyes sharp. You're running from something. That's none of your business. You're in my house. That makes it a little bit my business. Kael's jaw tightened. I didn't ask to be here. No, but you didn't fight very hard to stay in that forest either. Ronan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. I can smell it on you, Kael. Fear, old fear, the kind that doesn't fade. Someone hurt you. Someone you trusted. The words hit harder than they should have. Kael looked away, his throat tight. You don't know anything about me. I know you're in exile, Ronan said quietly. I know you were cast out young, probably for something you couldn't control. And I know you've been running ever since, trying to disappear into the human world like that'll make you safe. Kael's hands clenched into fists. How? Because I've seen it before, Ronan said, turning to face him. I know what it looks like when someone's been broken by their own kind. I'm not broken. No, Ronan agreed, but you're close. Silence filled the room, heavy and uncomfortable. Outside, the wind threw snow against the windows in rattling bursts. Why are you helping me? Kael asked finally. What do you want? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know yet, but there's something about you, something that doesn't make sense, and I don't like things that don't make sense. So I'm a puzzle to solve. Maybe. Ronan's mouth curved slightly. Or maybe you're something else entirely. Before Kael could figure out how to respond to that, Ronan headed for the door. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. Wait, Kael said. Ronan paused, looking back. The wolf! Did you see a wolf out there before you found me? Ronan's expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral. No. Why? No reason. Kael lay back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. Probably just hallucinating. Probably, Ronan agreed, but something in his tone suggested he didn't believe that any more than Kael did. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Kael lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing despite the exhaustion dragging at him. He shouldn't stay here, shouldn't trust Ronan, shouldn't let himself get comfortable, shouldn't believe for even a second that this could be anything other than temporary. But the bed was soft, the room was warm, and for the first time in 6 years he didn't have to sleep with one eye open and a knife in his hand. His eyes drifted closed, and deep inside, in the place where he kept the power locked away, something stirred. something that had been dormant for years, content to sleep as long as Kyle kept moving, kept running, kept himself isolated from anything that might wake it up. But Ronan Blackridge wasn't just anything. He was an alpha. Powerful, dominant, dangerous in ways Kyle hadn't encountered since his exile. And the power inside Kyle recognized that, responded to it, wanted no. Kale shut that thought down hard, burying it under 6 years of practice and control. Whatever this was, whatever he was feeling, it didn't matter. He'd be gone as soon as the storm cleared. Back on the road, back to the life he'd built out of scraps and survival and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. This was just a detour, nothing more. He repeated that to himself until sleep finally came, dragging him down into dreams of snow and wolves and golden eyes that watched him from the darkness, patient and knowing and absolutely certain that he would eventually stop running. And when he did, everything would change. Kale woke to sunlight cutting across his face and the smell of coffee drifting in from somewhere deeper in the house. For a few disoriented seconds, he didn't know where he was. The bed was too soft, the room too warm, everything too quiet. Then the pain in his shoulder kicked in and memory flooded back. The crash, the storm, Ronan Blackridge. He sat up slowly, testing his body. The ribs were sore but manageable. His arm throbbed dully in its sling. Overall, he felt like he'd been thrown down a mountainside, which wasn't far from the truth. But he was alive, and that was more than he'd expected 12 hours ago. The clothes from last night were still on the chair where he'd left them, stiff with dried blood and snowmelt. His boots sat by the door, caked in mud. He needed to get moving, needed to figure out how to get back to civilization and salvage what was left of his life. The truck was totaled, his gear probably scattered across the ravine, and he had maybe $300 in his bank account. Not great, but he'd started over with less. He made his way to the bathroom and splashed water on his face with his good hand. The mirror showed him what he already knew. He looked like hell. Bruises darkening along his jaw, a cut above his eyebrow that had scabbed over, eyes that were too hollowed out for someone only 23. The face of a man who'd been running for too long. When he emerged from the bedroom, he followed the coffee smell through the house. In daylight, the place was even more impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the forest dusted white with fresh snow, furniture that managed to look both expensive and lived in, art on the walls that Kyle suspected was probably worth more than he'd make in a lifetime. It was the kind of space that screamed power and control, everything in its place, nothing left to chance. He found Ronan in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a mug in his hand and his phone to his ear. He was dressed casually, jeans, a dark sweater, but somehow still managed to look like he owned everything in sight. When he saw Kyle, he held up one finger in a wait gesture and finished his conversation. "I don't care what Marcus thinks, Ronan said into the phone, his tone clipped. "The merger goes through by end of month or I pull funding entirely. Make it happen." He hung up without waiting for a response and set the phone down. "Coffee?" "Yeah." Kyle's voice came out rougher than he'd intended. Ronan poured a second mug and slid it across the counter. "How's the arm?" "Attached." "That's not what I asked." Kyle took a sip of the coffee. It was good. Better than the instant stuff he usually bought. "It hurts, but I've had worse." Ronan studied him for a moment, those sharp eyes taking in details Kyle probably didn't want noticed. "The storm's clearing. Roads should be passable by this afternoon." "Good. Then I can get out of your way." "And go where exactly? Your truck's destroyed. You've got broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder that needs at least a week of rest. What's your plan?" Kyle set the mug down. "That's not your problem." "Maybe I'm making it my problem." "Why would you do that?" Ronan leaned back against the counter, his expression unreadable. "Because I'm curious about you, about what you are." There it was, the real reason. Kale had known it was coming, but hearing it out loud still made his stomach tighten. "I'm nobody, just a guy who drives trucks and minds his own business." "You're lying again." "I'm really not." "Then explain why every animal within a mile of this house has been acting strange since you got here." Ronan set his mug down with deliberate care. "The deer won't come near the property. The birds have gone quiet. And this morning I found wolf tracks circling the house. Fresh ones, from some time after the storm stopped. 3 different wolves, all just watching. Kale's chest went cold. That's not because of me. No? Then what's your theory? Maybe they smelled you. Alphas make wild animals nervous. Wild animals avoid alphas. They don't surround their territory and wait. Ronan moved closer, and Kyle fought the urge to step back. I've been doing this a long time, Kyle. I know when something's off. And you? You're very off. If you're so worried about it, why haven't you kicked me out? Because I want to understand it first. Ronan's voice dropped. What happened to you? What did they do that made you like this? Kale's jaw clenched. Nothing. I was born wrong, remember? That's what the alpha said. Born wrong how? Does it matter? It might. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Kale could feel the power inside him stirring again, responding to Ronan's proximity, his intensity, the sheer force of will radiating off him. It wanted to reach out, to connect, to show Ronan exactly what he was dealing with. But Kyle had spent 6 years learning to suppress that impulse, and he wasn't about to lose control now. I was born during an eclipse, Kyle said finally. A lunar eclipse on the winter solstice. The pack elders said it was a bad omen. The children born under those conditions were marked by the old magic. But my parents didn't care. They wanted a kid, and they got one. And the power? Showed up when I was 16. Started small. Animals following me, responding to me even when I didn't want them to. Then it got stronger. By the time I was 17, I could call things from the forest without even trying. Deer, foxes, even predators. They'd come when I called and they'd do what I asked. The pack alpha saw it as a threat to his authority. So he exiled you. Yeah, said I was destabilizing the natural orders. Said if I stayed, I'd end up challenging him whether I meant to or not. Kyle's voice hardened. He wasn't wrong. Ronan was quiet for a moment, processing that. Can you control it? Most of the time. And when you can't? Kale didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. Show me, Ronan said suddenly. What? Show me what you can do. I want to see it. That's a terrible idea. Maybe, but I'm asking anyway. Kyle shook his head. You don't know what you're asking for. This isn't some party trick. When I use it, things happen. Things I can't always predict or stop. I'm willing to take that risk. Well, I'm not. Kyle pushed away from the counter. Look, I appreciate you helping me out last night, really, but I need to leave before this gets complicated. It's already complicated. Then let's uncomplicate it. Point me toward the nearest town and I'll figure out the rest. Ronan studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. No. Excuse me? You heard me. You're not leaving. Not yet. Kale felt anger flare hot in his chest. You can't keep me here. I'm not keeping you anywhere. I'm suggesting, strongly, that you stay until you're healed enough to travel safely. Call it basic human decency. There's nothing decent about this. Kale's voice rose despite himself. You want me to stay so you can study me like some kind of science project. Figure out what makes me tick, see if you can use it somehow. That's what alphas do, right? Find weakness and exploit it? Ronan's expression darkened. You don't know anything about what I do. I know enough. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one making assumptions. I offered you shelter. I set your arm. I fed you. And now you're throwing it back in my face because you've got trust issues the size of this mountain. The words hit like a slap. Kale opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because Ronan wasn't wrong. He was projecting, letting old wounds dictate his response to a situation that maybe, possibly, wasn't as sinister as his paranoia wanted to believe. Fine, Kale said quietly. Maybe I do have trust issues, but can you blame me? 6 years ago, my own pack turned their backs on me. 6 years I've been alone, and the one time I let my guard down, someone could get hurt. So yeah, I'm suspicious. And yeah, I assume the worst, because assuming the worst has kept me alive. Ronan's posture softened slightly. I'm not your old pack. I know that. Do you? Because you're looking at me like I'm about to stab you in the back. Kale ran his good hand through his hair, frustrated. What do you want from me? Honestly, I don't know yet. But I think there's a reason we crossed paths last night, and I think if you leave now, we'll both regret it. You sound awfully sure about that. I'm sure about very few things, Kael, but I'm sure about this. Before Kael could respond, something moved outside the window. Both of them turned to look. A deer stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the house. Then another appeared beside it, and another. Within seconds, there were at least a dozen deer, all perfectly still, all facing the house with that same eerie focus. "That's not normal," Ronan said quietly. "No, it's not." "Are you doing that?" "Not on purpose." But even as he said it, Kael could feel the connection, thin threads of awareness linking him to each animal, responding to something he couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe. Or need. Or the simple fact that Ronan was standing too close and Kael's control was slipping. "Make them leave," Ronan said. "I'm trying." "Try harder." Kael closed his eyes and reached for the power, trying to gentle it, to ease it back down into the quiet place where it usually lived. But it didn't want to go. It wanted to expand, to reach out, to connect with every living thing in the forest and bind them all together in a web of awareness that would... No. He slammed his mental walls back up, hard enough that pain lanced through his skull. The connection snapped. Outside, the deer scattered, bounding away into the trees like they'd been released from invisible chains. Kael staggered, catching himself against the counter. His head was pounding, and his arm felt like it was on fire. "That was impressive," Ronan said. His voice was carefully neutral. "And terrifying. Welcome to my life. Does it always hurt like that?" "Only when I fight it." Kael straightened slowly, waiting for the pain to subside. "Usually I just let it happen and deal with the consequences later. But here, with you, I can't afford to do that." "Why not?" "Because you're an alpha, and my power doesn't play well with alpha dominance. It sees it as a challenge." Ronan absorbed that. "What happens if you stop fighting it?" "I don't know. Never tried." "Maybe you should." Kael laughed, bitter and sharp. "Yeah, that's a great idea. Just let the uncontrollable magic loose in your house and see what happens. What could possibly go wrong?" "I'm serious." "So am I. This isn't something you experiment with. People get hurt. Has anyone actually gotten hurt, or are you just assuming they will?" The question stopped Kael cold, because the truth was, he didn't know. He'd never let the power run free, never tested its limits, never trusted it enough to find out what it could really do. The alpha had been so certain it was dangerous that Kael had internalized that fear, made it gospel, built his entire life around containing something he'd never fully understood. "I don't know," he admitted finally, "but I'm not willing to risk it to find out." Ronan nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for." "You don't know me." "Not yet, but I'm learning." The conversation was interrupted by Ronan's phone buzzing. He glanced at it and his expression shifted, becoming sharp and focused. "I need to take this. Business. Make yourself at home. There's food in the fridge if you're hungry." He disappeared down the hallway, already talking in that clipped, authoritative tone that probably made board members nervous. Kael stood there for a moment, then wandered over to the windows. The forest stretched out in all directions, peaceful and white and deceptively calm. No deer now. No wolves. Just trees and snow and silence. But he could feel them out there, watching, waiting. The day passed in strange suspension. Ronan spent most of it on calls, dealing with what sounded like a major business crisis. Kael caught fragments of conversation, something about a hostile takeover, shareholders demanding answers, a competitor making aggressive moves. He gathered that Ronan wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful in the human world too, running some kind of corporate empire that stretched far beyond these mountains. It made Kael wonder why someone like that would bother helping a nobody exile. What angle was Ronan working? What did he stand to gain? By late afternoon, Kael's restlessness had reached a breaking point. His body ached from sitting still, his mind was going in circles, and the walls of the house, beautiful as they were, felt like they were closing in. He needed air, space, something. He found his boots by the door and pulled them on awkwardly with one hand. His jacket was ruined, but there was a coat closet in the hallway and he borrowed a heavy parka that smelled faintly of cedar and something else, something distinctly Ronin. Outside, the cold hit him like a wall, but it was a clean cold, sharp and bracing, nothing like the deadly chill of the storm. The snow crunched under his boots as he walked, aimless at first, just putting distance between himself and the house. He found himself drawn toward the tree line. The forest pulled at him the way it always had, familiar and dangerous, and home in a way nothing else ever felt. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, one hand resting against a pine trunk, and just breathed. The wolf appeared so quietly Cale almost didn't notice it. 1 second he was alone, and the next it was there. The same dark-furred animal from last night, watching him with those uncanny, intelligent eyes. "You again," Cale said softly. The wolf sat down, patient as stone. "Why are you following me?" No answer, of course, just that steady gaze. Cale felt the power stir inside him, reaching out toward the wolf without conscious direction. The connection formed easily, naturally, like slipping into warm water. Through it he could sense the wolf's calm curiosity, its lack of fear, its recognition of him as something other than human, or pack, or prey. Something in between. Something that belonged to the wild. "I don't belong anywhere," Cale told it. "That's the whole problem." The wolf huffed, almost like disagreement. Then it stood and started walking into the trees, glancing back over its shoulder. Cale knew he should go back to the house. Knew following a wild wolf into the forest was probably the worst idea he'd had in weeks. But his feet were already moving, drawn by instinct and curiosity, and the simple fact that the wolf felt safer than Ronan's questions. They walked for maybe 20 minutes, the wolf setting an easy pace that Cale could match despite his injuries. The forest grew denser, the trees older, the silence deeper. This was old-growth territory, the kind of place where humans rarely came and the wilderness held its secrets close. The wolf led him to a clearing where a stream cut through the snow, still running despite the cold. There, waiting, were more wolves. 5 of them, all sizes, all watching Cale with that same eerie focus. His breath caught. This was a wild pack, not shifters, just wolves, living by instinct and territory and blood. They should have been wary of him, should have kept their distance. Instead, they were waiting like they'd known he was coming. The largest wolf, a gray-furred male with scars across his muzzle, stood and approached. Cale held very still, every survival instinct screaming at him to run. But running would trigger their chase instinct, and he'd never outrun 5 wolves. So he waited. The gray wolf circled him once, scenting the air, then sat down directly in front of him. The other wolves formed a loose semicircle. And Cale understood suddenly and clearly what was happening. They were offering allegiance. "No," he said out loud. "No, you can't. I'm not your alpha. I'm not anyone's alpha." But the power inside him knew different. It recognized this for what it was. A choice. A chance. A path he'd been avoiding for 6 years because he'd been too afraid to walk it. If he accepted this, if he let the bond form, he'd be bound to these wolves the way an alpha bound a pack. They would answer to him, protect him, die for him if necessary. And he would be responsible for them, for their survival, their safety, their lives. It was everything he'd been running from. The gray wolf waited, patient and expectant. Cale closed his eyes and reached inward, toward the power he'd spent so long suppressing. It rose to meet him eagerly, warm and fierce and utterly certain. This was what it wanted, what it had always wanted. Not to be contained, but to be used. Not to destroy, but to connect. He let it flow. The bond formed like lightning, sharp and bright and irrevocable. He felt each wolf lock into place in his awareness, their emotions bleeding into his, their loyalty settling over him like a weight. It didn't hurt. It felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking together. When he opened his eyes, the wolves were closer, pressing against him, their body heat warming him through the borrowed coat. The gray wolf laid his massive head against Cale's leg, a gesture of trust so profound Cale's throat tightened. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, we do this together." A sound made him turn. Ronan stood at the edge of the clearing, his expression unreadable. He'd been quiet enough that Kyle hadn't heard his approach, and judging by the look on his face, he'd seen everything. "How long have you been there?" Kyle asked. "Long enough." Ronan's voice was carefully controlled. "I followed you when I realized you'd left. Thought you might do something reckless. And? I was right." The wolves shifted, moving between Kyle and Ronan in a protective formation. Kyle felt their wariness through the bond, their distrust of this alpha who wasn't pack, who smelled of power and dominance and potential threat. "Stand down," Kyle told them quietly. "He's not the enemy." The wolves hesitated, then slowly moved aside. But they didn't relax. Ronan took a careful step forward. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "Probably something stupid." "You bonded a wild pack. Ronan shook his head. "That shouldn't be possible. Wild wolves don't form that kind of connection with anyone, not even shifters." "Yeah, well, I'm not exactly normal." "No, you're really not." Ronan was looking at him differently now, with something that might have been respect or might have been concern. "This changes things." "What things?" "Everything." Ronan gestured around the clearing. "You can't just walk around with a pack of wild wolves following you. People will notice. They'll ask questions. And if the wrong people find out what you can do, I know. That's why I've been hiding for 6 years. Hiding doesn't work anymore. Not after this." Ronan's voice was urgent now. "Kyle, listen to me. If your old pack finds out you've bonded wild wolves, they'll see it as a direct challenge. They'll come for you. Let them." "You don't mean that." But Kyle did. For the first time in 6 years, he meant it. Because standing here with wolves pressed against his legs and power humming under his skin, he didn't feel like running anymore. He felt like standing his ground. "Maybe I'm tired of being afraid," he said. Ronan stared at him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled. Not the careful, controlled expression Kyle had seen before, but something real and almost dangerous. "Good," Ronan said, "because I think you're about to get your wish." He pointed past Kyle, toward the far side of the clearing. 3 figures emerged from the trees. Shifters. Kyle could tell immediately from their scent and the way they moved. They wore matching jackets with a symbol Kyle recognized from his past. The crest of the North Ridge pack. His old pack. They'd found him. The 3 shifters stopped at the edge of the clearing, and Kyle's entire body went rigid. He knew them. Not their names. He'd been too young when they exiled him to remember every face. But he knew the type. Enforcers. The ones the Alpha sent when he wanted a message delivered with teeth. The one in front was tall and broad, built like he spent his life throwing people around. His eyes locked onto Kyle with the kind of focused aggression that meant this wasn't a social call. The other 2 flanked him, slightly smaller, but no less dangerous, moving with the coordinated precision of wolves who'd hunted together for years. "Kyle Varen," the leader said. His voice carried across the clearing, flat and cold. "You're a hard man to find." Kyle's wolves growled low in their throats, a sound that vibrated through the bond and into his chest. He put a hand on the gray's head, steadying himself as much as the animal. "Wasn't aware anyone was looking." "You weren't supposed to be." The enforcer's eyes flicked to Ronan, assessing, then dismissed him as irrelevant. "But word travels. Truck crash on the mountain pass, driver walks away in the middle of a blizzard that should have killed him. That kind of thing gets noticed." "So what? You came all this way to congratulate me on surviving?" "We came to bring you back." The words hit like a punch. Kale's laugh came out sharp and bitter. "Back? You kicked me out, made it real clear I wasn't welcome. What changed?" The Alpha changed his mind. The enforcer took a step forward. The wolves tensed, and Kyle felt their readiness to attack thrumming through the bond. "He wants to talk, says maybe there's a place for you after all." That's interesting, because 6 years ago he said if I ever came back he'd kill me. Times change. The pack needs... The enforcer stopped himself like he'd said too much. "The Alpha wants you back. That's all you need to know." Kyle felt Ronan shift position beside him, moving closer without being obvious about it. The air between them charged with unspoken questions, but neither of them looked away from the enforcers. "And if I say no?" Kael asked. The enforcer's expression hardened. That's not an option. Everything's an option. Not this. The Alpha gave an order. You come back or we bring you back. Your choice how that happens. One of the other enforcers, a younger guy with a scar cutting through his eyebrow, spoke up. Don't make this difficult. Varen, we're not here to hurt you. Just come talk to the Alpha. Hear what he has to say. That's all. But Kael had lived in the pack long enough to know how these things worked. You didn't send 3 enforcers to politely invite someone to a conversation. You sent them when you wanted compliance, and you didn't care how you got it. What does he really want? Kael asked. And don't give me that reunion bullshit. The Alpha doesn't change his mind, not about exiles. The lead enforcer's jaw tightened. For a moment, Kael thought he might actually answer honestly. Then his expression closed off, became unreadable. That's between you and him. Ronan finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Who's your Alpha? The enforcers turned to look at him properly for the first time. The leader's eyes narrowed. Marcus Thorne, Northridge Pack. And you are? Someone who doesn't appreciate uninvited guests on his property. The enforcer's posture shifted, becoming more aggressive. Your property ends at the tree line. We're on neutral ground. Neutral ground that borders my territory, which makes this my business. Ronan's voice dropped into that Alpha register that made even Kael's instincts want to submit. State your claim or leave. Our claim is with Varen, doesn't concern you. He's under my protection. That makes it very much my concern. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kael's head whipped toward Ronan. What are you doing? Making a choice, Ronan said quietly, not taking his eyes off the enforcers. Same as you. The lead enforcer laughed, harsh and dismissive. Your protection? You don't even know what he is, what he can do. Marcus warned us you might try something like this, Blackridge. Said you had a habit of collecting strays. Marcus talks too much. Maybe, but he's right about this one. Varen's dangerous, unstable. He doesn't belong with you any more than he belonged with us. Then why do you want him back? Ronan asked. The enforcer didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. They wanted Kael back because they needed something from him, something they couldn't get any other way, and that made him a tool, not a person, a weapon to be wielded. Kael felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. I'm not going back. You don't have a choice. Yeah, I do, and I'm making it right now. Kael took a step forward, and his wolves moved with him, a unified front. Tell Marcus I said no. Tell him I'm done running, done hiding, done pretending I'm something I'm not just to make him comfortable. And tell him if he wants me, he can come get me himself. The clearing went very quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The lead enforcer's face darkened. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. For a moment, Kael thought they might actually leave. The enforcers exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then the leader's hand moved to his belt, and Kael saw the gun. Last chance, the enforcer said, raising the weapon. It wasn't aimed at Kael. It was aimed at the gray wolf pressed against his leg. Come quietly, or I start putting down your pets. The bond exploded with the wolves' fear and rage. Kael felt it like electricity in his veins, burning away thought, leaving only instinct. The power surged up from wherever he'd been keeping it locked down, and this time he didn't fight it. The forest erupted. Wolves poured out of the trees, not just the 5 who'd bonded with him, but dozens more, wild and feral, and answering a call Kael hadn't consciously made. They came from every direction, surrounding the clearing in a moving wall of teeth and fur. Birds exploded from the canopy, their calls sharp and aggressive. Even the deer reappeared, stamping and snorting, their usual skittishness replaced by something fierce and protective. The enforcers froze, weapons raised but clearly overwhelmed. They were outnumbered 20-1, and every creature in the clearing was focused on them with predatory intent. Stand down, Kael said. His voice came out strange, layered with something that wasn't entirely human. Or I let them tear you apart. The lead enforcer's hand shook slightly on his gun. You can't control all of them. The second you slip, they'll turn on you too. Want to bet? They stared at each other across the clearing.
Kale could feel the power thrumming through every animal, binding them to his will, holding them on the edge of violence. It would be so easy to let go, to unleash them, to watch the enforcers run for their lives. Part of him wanted to. The angry, hurt part that remembered exile and loneliness and 6 years of being told he was wrong. But another part, the part that still remembered who he'd been before all this, pulled back. "Go," Kyle said. "Now. And don't come back." The enforcers didn't need to be told twice. They backed away slowly, weapons still raised, then turned and ran. The wolves tracked their movement, growling, but Kyle held them in place with sheer force of will. Only when the enforcers had disappeared completely did he let the power ebb. The animals dispersed gradually, melting back into the forest like they'd never been there. Within minutes, the clearing was empty again except for Kyle, Ronan, and the 5 bonded wolves. Kale's legs gave out. He went down hard on his knees in the snow, shaking. The power receded like a tide, leaving him hollow and exhausted. His head pounded. His shoulder screamed. Everything hurt. Ronan was beside him immediately, one hand on his back. "Breathe, just breathe. Did I—" Kale's voice cracked. "Did I just threaten to kill 3 people? You defended yourself. That's not the same thing." Felt the same. Kale pressed his good hand against his eyes, trying to stop the shaking. "I could have done it, could have let the wolves loose. Part of me wanted to. But you didn't. This time. What about next time? What happens when I can't pull back?" Ronan was quiet for a moment. "That's the choice you'll have to make. Every time." Kyle looked up at him, searching for judgment or fear or disgust. But Ronan's expression was steady, almost calm, like watching someone summon a forest full of predators was just another Tuesday. "Why did you do that, Kyle asked. "Tell them I was under your protection. You don't owe me anything." "Maybe I wanted to see what you'd do." "And?" "You did better than I expected." Ronan helped him stand. "But this isn't over. Those enforcers will report back to their alpha. And Marcus Thorne isn't the type to take no for an answer. You know him? We've crossed paths. He runs a traditional pack. Old rules, old hierarchy. The kind of alpha who sees anything he can't control as a threat." Ronan's expression was grim. "If he's trying to bring you back after 6 years, it's because he thinks he can use you. Probably for territory expansion or to intimidate rivals. You're a weapon to him, nothing more." Kyle had already figured that out, but hearing it stated so bluntly still stung. "So what do I do?" "That depends. What do you want?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. What did Kyle want? 6 years ago, he'd wanted to belong, to have a pack, a place, a purpose. But exile had burned that out of him, replaced it with the simpler goal of survival. Now, standing here with power humming under his skin and wolves at his feet, he didn't know anymore. "I want them to leave me alone," he said finally. "That's not going to happen. Not after today. Then I want to make them regret coming after me." Ronan smiled, sharp and approving. "That I can help with." They walked back to the house in silence, the bonded wolves trailing behind like shadows. Kyle's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. He'd used his power, really used it, not just the careful, controlled applications he'd allowed himself over the years. And it had worked. He'd faced down 3 trained enforcers and sent them running without throwing a single punch. But the victory felt hollow. Because Ronan was right, this wasn't over. Marcus would send more people, and next time they wouldn't come to talk. Back at the house, Ronan disappeared into what looked like an office, while Kyle collapsed onto the couch. The wolves settled around him, the gray laying his massive head across Kyle's lap. The contact was grounding, reassuring in a way Kyle hadn't experienced since before exile. He must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, Ronan was shaking his shoulder gently. "Kyle, wake up." Kyle blinked, disoriented. The light outside had changed. It was late afternoon now, the sun sinking toward the mountains. "What time is it?" "Almost 5. We need to talk." Something in Ronan's tone made Kyle sit up straighter. "What's wrong?" Ronan handed him a tablet. On the screen was what looked like a surveillance photo, grainy and taken from a distance, but clear enough.
It showed Kyle in the clearing surrounded by wolves, power radiating off him in a visible distortion of the air. "Where did you get this?" Kyle demanded. "Someone emailed it to me an hour ago. Anonymous sender, but the message was clear." Ronan pulled up the email. 3 words. "We know everything." Kale's blood went cold. The enforcers. They must have had someone watching. Maybe, or maybe someone else was out there. Ronan took the tablet back. "Either way, this is bad. If this photo gets out, if the wrong people see what you can do, you'll have a lot more than one pack coming after you." "How many people have you told about me?" "No one. I don't discuss my personal affairs." "Then who sent this?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Ronan's expression was hard. "In the meantime, you need to stay here. Don't leave the property. Don't use your power unless absolutely necessary, and definitely don't go wandering off into the forest alone. You can't keep me locked up." "I'm not locking you up. I'm trying to keep you alive." Ronan's voice softened slightly. "KL, I know you don't trust easily. I know you've been burned before, but right now I'm the best chance you've got. So please, just trust me on this." Kyle wanted to argue, wanted to tell Ronan he didn't need protecting, that he could handle himself. But the photo on the tablet told a different story. Someone was watching. Someone knew. And that made everything infinitely more complicated. "Fine," he said finally. "But if this is some kind of trap..." "It's not. How can you be sure?" "Because if I wanted to trap you, I would have done it already." Ronan stood. "I have some calls to make. Help yourself to whatever you need. And keep those wolves inside. The last thing we need is someone spotting them." He left before Kyle could respond. Kale sat there staring at the tablet, his mind racing. Everything was falling apart. The careful anonymity he'd built over 6 years was crumbling. His old pack knew where he was. Someone had photographic evidence of his power, and he was trapped in a stranger's house, dependent on an alpha he barely knew for protection he wasn't sure he wanted. The gray wolf whined softly and pressed closer. Kale buried his hand in the animal's fur, taking comfort from the simple warmth of the contact. "What am I doing?" he whispered to the wolf. "This is insane." The wolf just huffed and settled more firmly against him. Hours passed. Ronan stayed locked in his office, voice occasionally audible through the door as he made call after call. Kale tried to rest but couldn't. Every noise made him jump. Every shadow outside the windows looked like a threat. His nerves were shot. His arm ached, and his head felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Around midnight, he gave up on sleep entirely and went to the kitchen. He was rummaging through the fridge when Ronan appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" Ronan asked. "Not even close." "Yeah, me neither." Ronan moved to the counter and started making coffee. "I've been doing some research. Your old alpha, Marcus Thorne, has been consolidating power in the Northern Territories, absorbing smaller packs, forcing alliances, building something bigger than traditional pack structure allows. That doesn't sound legal. It's not. But he's been careful to stay under the radar. No one's challenged him yet because no one wants to start a war." Ronan poured 2 mugs. "But if he's trying to bring you back, it's because he thinks you'll give him an edge. Your power over wild animals, that's territory control without having to fight for it. He could expand into areas no pack has ever claimed." Kale accepted the coffee, wrapping his hand around the mug for warmth. "So I'm a land grab?" "Essentially. And if I refuse, then he'll try to neutralize you. Can't have a weapon running around that he doesn't control." The words settled like lead in Kyle's stomach. "This is why I stayed away, why I kept my head down. The second anyone knows what I am, I become a target." "Maybe. Or maybe you become something they can't ignore." Ronan leaned against the counter. "You spent 6 years running. How's that working out for you?" "I'm alive, aren't I?" "Are you? Or are you just surviving?" Ronan's eyes were sharp. "There's a difference." Before Kale could answer, his phone, which he'd left charging on the counter, buzzed. He picked it up and froze. "Unknown number, text message. We have your friend from the crash site. Come alone or he dies." Attached was a photo of Danny, the mechanic from the truck stop where Kyle usually got his routes. He was bound to a chair, blood on his face, eyes wide with terror. "No," Kyle breathed. No, no, no. Ronan was beside him instantly. What is it? Kyle showed him the phone. Ronan's expression went dark. It's a trap. I know it's a trap. But they have Danny. He helped me out when I first went on the road. Gave me work when no one else would. I can't just leave him. You also can't walk into an ambush. Watch me. Kyle was already moving, grabbing his borrowed coat. The wolves stood, agitated by his distress. Ronan caught his arm. Think about this. They're using him to get to you. The second you show up, they'll take you both. Then I'll fight my way out. Against how many? You saw 3 enforcers today. Marcus probably has 20 more. You can't fight an entire pack. I can try. And die trying. That helps no one. Kale yanked his arm free. So what do you suggest? I just let them kill Danny to prove a point? No. I suggest we go together, with backup. What backup? In case you haven't noticed, I don't exactly have a lot of friends. Ronan pulled out his own phone. But I do. 20 minutes later, 2 SUVs pulled up outside. 6 people climbed out, all of them carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that said they knew how to handle trouble. Ronan met them at the door, speaking in low tones Kyle couldn't quite hear. One of them, a woman with short dark hair and scars on her knuckles, looked past Ronan to where Kyle stood with his wolves. That's him? The one causing all this drama? That's him, Ronan confirmed. He looks half dead. He's tougher than he looks. The woman snorted but didn't argue. She turned to the others. Standard extraction. In and out. We don't engage unless necessary. Priority is getting the civilian out alive. Kale stepped forward. Who are you people? People who owe Ronan favors, the woman said. I'm Sarah. That's all you need to know. I don't need... Yeah, you do. Sarah cut him off. Because whatever you're walking into, it's designed to kill you. And if Ronan's calling us, that means he thinks you're worth saving. So shut up and let us do our jobs. Kale looked at Ronan. I didn't ask for this. I know, but you're getting it anyway. Ronan's expression was unreadable. You want to save your friend? This is how we do it. The location in the text was an abandoned lumber mill about 30 miles north. The kind of place that had been shut down decades ago and left to rot, all rusted equipment and collapsed buildings. Perfect for an ambush. They split into 2 vehicles. Kale rode with Ronan and Sarah, the wolves crammed into the back. The drive was tense and silent. Kale kept checking his phone, but there were no more messages. Just that one photo of Danny, beaten and terrified. How do you know him? Ronan asked quietly. Danny? Met him 6 years ago when I was 17 and desperate. He gave me work. Didn't ask questions. Paid cash. Basically kept me alive that first year. Kale's jaw tightened. This is my fault. If they know about him, it's because they've been watching me, following my connections. Or someone told them. The words hung in the air. Kale's head snapped toward Ronan. What? Think about it. How did Marcus know where to find you? How did someone get that photo of you using your power? How did they know about Danny? Ronan's voice was grim. Someone's been feeding them information. Who? That's what we need to figure out. They pulled up to the mill just before 2 in the morning. The place looked exactly as threatening as Kyle had imagined. Dark, isolated, surrounded by forest. Perfect for making someone disappear. Sarah and her team spread out, communicating through earpieces and hand signals. Ronan stayed close to Kyle, one hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture that might have been reassuring or might have been restraining. Stay behind me, Ronan said. Let them make the first move. And if they hurt Danny, then we respond, but not before. Kale's wolves pressed against his legs, their tension bleeding through the bond. He could feel other animals nearby too, deer in the forest, owls in the trees, even rats in the mill's ruins. All of them watching, waiting, ready to answer if he called. A door opened in the main building. Marcus Thorne stepped out, and Kale's breath caught. The Alpha looked exactly as Kale remembered. Tall, powerfully built, with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He'd aged in 6 years, new lines around his mouth and eyes, but the authority radiating off him was unchanged. Behind him, 2 enforcers dragged Danny forward. The mechanic looked worse than in the photo. More blood, one eye swollen shut. But he was alive. Kyle Varen, Marcus called across the clearing. Good of you to come. Kale stepped forward, shaking off Ronan's restraining hand. Let him go. This is between us. Everything's between us. I'm your alpha. Or have you forgotten? Marcus's smile was cold. You should never have run, boy. Made this so much harder than it needed to be. You exiled me. Said I was a threat. You were. You still are. Marcus gestured, and the enforcers forced Danny to his knees. But now I understand what you can do, what you're worth. And I'm willing to make an exception. Come back to the pack. Serve me. And your friend lives. Kale's power stirred, responding to his anger. And if I refuse, then he dies. And so do you. And anyone else foolish enough to stand with you. Marcus's eyes cut to Ronan, including your new alpha. He's not my alpha. No? Then why is he here? Kale didn't have an answer to that. He glanced at Ronan, who was watching Marcus with an expression of calm calculation that somehow made him look more dangerous. You can't win this, Kyle, Marcus continued. I have 20 enforcers in these woods, 50 more ready to move if I give the word. You're outnumbered and outmatched. The smart play is to submit. I stopped being smart 6 years ago when you kicked me out. Marcus's expression hardened. Then you're a fool. He nodded to one of the enforcers. The man raised a gun and pointed it at Danny's head. Kyle's world narrowed to that single moment. The gun. Danny's terrified face. The enforcer's finger on the trigger, and somewhere deep inside the power screaming at him to act, to protect, to destroy anything that threatened what was his. He made a choice. He let go. The forest exploded with life. Wolves poured from the trees. Not dozens this time, but hundreds, wild and feral and furious. Birds descended in shrieking clouds. Deer charged from the undergrowth. Even the rats came, a seething tide of fur and teeth. Every animal within a mile radius answered his call, bound to his will, ready to tear apart anything he pointed them at. Marcus's enforcers opened fire, but it was useless. There were too many targets, too much chaos. The wolves hit them like a wave, dragging them down. The birds went for eyes and faces. The deer trampled anything in their path. Kale walked through the carnage, untouched, his power burning through him like wildfire. He was barely conscious of Ronan shouting something behind him, of Sarah and her team engaging Marcus's people, of Danny screaming as an enforcer tried to use him as a shield. All he could feel was the bond with every creature in the clearing, the absolute certainty that nothing would hurt what he'd claimed as his. He reached Danny, and the wolves parted like water. The enforcer holding the gun took one look at Kyle's face and ran. Smart choice. Get him out of here, Kale said to Sarah, who'd appeared at his side. Now. She didn't argue. Just grabbed Danny and hauled him toward the SUVs. Marcus was backing away, his confidence shattered. What are you? Kale faced him across the clearing. His voice came out layered with something ancient and inhuman. I'm what you made me. What you were too afraid to let me become. You can't control this. It'll consume you. Maybe, but it'll consume you first. For a moment, he almost did it. Almost let the wolves tear Marcus apart, let the forest reclaim what the pack had stolen. But Ronan's voice cut through the haze. Kyle, that's enough. And somehow, from Ronan, he could accept it. He pulled back, dragging the power under control with an effort that left him shaking. The animals retreated, disappearing back into the forest as quickly as they'd come. Marcus stared at him, bloodied and beaten and terrified in a way Kale had never seen an alpha look. This isn't over. Yes, Kyle said quietly, it is. He turned and walked away, leaving his old alpha kneeling in the mud surrounded by unconscious enforcers and the wreckage of his authority. They were almost to the SUVs when Kyle's legs gave out. Ronan caught him before he hit the ground, supporting his weight like it was nothing. I've got you, Ronan said. And for the first time in 6 years, Kyle believed it. They'd made it maybe 5 miles from the mill when Kyle's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, expecting another threat from Marcus. Instead, He found a video file from the same anonymous sender as before. His hand shook as he opened it. The video showed him in Ronan's office, 3 days ago, before the crash. He watched himself standing by the window, completely unaware he was being filmed. Then the camera panned to show Ronan at his desk, speaking into his phone. "Yes, I found him," Ronan's voice said clearly. "Kael Verin, the exile with the animal power. No, he doesn't suspect anything yet. I'll keep him close until we can confirm what he's capable of, then we'll discuss terms for transfer." The video ended. Kael's blood turned to ice. He looked at Ronan, who was driving, completely unaware of what Kael had just seen. "Stop the car," Kael said. "What?" "I said stop the car." Ronan pulled over, concerned. "Kael, what's wrong?" Kael showed him the phone, watched Ronan's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that might have been guilt. "That's not what it looks like," Ronan said. "Really? Because it looks like you've been investigating me since before we met. Like the crash, the rescue, all of it was just a setup to get close to me." "Kael, were you working with Marcus? Is this whole thing just some deal between alphas?" "No, I swear to you, I'm not working with Marcus." "Then who are you talking to in that video?" Ronan was quiet for too long. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it. I can't. Not yet." And that was all the answer Kael needed. He opened the car door and stepped out into the night, his wolves following. Behind him, he heard Ronan calling his name, but he didn't turn back. He'd been played. Again. By another alpha who saw him as a tool, a weapon, a thing to be studied and controlled and used. He should have known better than to trust. The forest swallowed him, and Kael Verin disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind everything, including the one person who might have actually cared. Kael ran until his lungs burned and his legs threatened to give out, the wolves keeping pace beside him like shadows made flesh. He didn't know where he was going, deeper into the mountains, away from roads and houses and anyone who might recognize him, away from Ronan's lies and Marcus's threats, and the constant weight of being something everyone wanted to control. The bond with his wolves pulsed steady and sure, the only thing keeping him grounded as fury and betrayal churned through his chest. He'd been such a fool. Believing Ronan's concern was genuine, thinking maybe someone actually gave a damn about him as a person, rather than a weapon. The video played on repeat in his mind, Ronan's voice discussing him like a business transaction, planning to hand him over to someone for the right price. He stopped finally in a ravine where a frozen stream cut between rock walls. His breath came in ragged gasps, condensation fogging the air. The gray wolf pressed against his leg, whining softly. "I know," Kael said, his voice raw. "I know we can't run forever." But what else was there? Going back meant choosing sides in a conflict he wanted no part of. Staying meant fighting battles that weren't his. And trusting anyone, alpha or otherwise, had proven to be a catastrophically bad idea. His phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, but something made him check. A text from an unknown number, different from the one that had sent the video. "Ronan didn't betray you. The video was edited. Meet me and I'll prove it." Sarah Kael stared at the message, his jaw tight. It could be another trap. Could be Ronan sending his people to drag Kael back. Could be literally anything designed to manipulate him into making another stupid mistake. But Sarah had helped extract Danny, had fought beside them at the mill. If anyone in Ronan's circle might tell him the truth, it was probably her. He typed back, "Where?" The response came immediately. "Old fire tower, 3 miles east of Ronan's property, 1 hour. Come alone or don't come at all." Kael looked at his wolves. The gray met his eyes with that unsettling intelligence, almost like he understood the choice being made. "Alone might be a problem," Kael muttered, but he started walking anyway. The fire tower was a rusted skeleton against the sky, probably built in the 70s and abandoned when the Forestry Service went digital. Sarah was already there, leaning against one of the support struts with her arms crossed. She straightened when she saw Kael emerge from the trees. "You came," she said. "You said you had proof." "I do, but first, call off your honor guard. They're making me nervous." Kael glanced at the wolves, who'd spread out in a defensive perimeter around the tower. "They stay."
Fine. Just keep them from eating me and we're good. Sarah pulled out a laptop from a bag at her feet and opened it. The video you received was doctored. Someone took footage from Ronan's security system and spliced in audio from a different conversation. Watch. She turned the screen toward him. The same footage played, but this time with a timestamp and metadata visible. Then she pulled up another file, audio only, dated 3 months earlier. Ronan's voice. Yes, I found him. Kael Varen, the exile with the animal power. A pause, then a different voice Kael didn't recognize. And I need to confirm what he's capable of before we discuss anything. I won't hand over someone who might be a threat to your pack without proper assessment. Terms for transfer? Only if he agrees. I don't deal in slaves, Marcus. You know that. The audio cut off. Sarah looked at Kael steadily. That conversation happened 3 months ago. Ronan was negotiating safe passage for a different exile, a kid from Marcus's pack who wanted out. Marcus was demanding guarantees. The conversation had nothing to do with you. Kael's chest felt tight. Then why didn't Ronan just tell me that? Because the real video shows him talking to someone else entirely.
Someone he's been working with to take down Marcus's operation. And if Marcus knew about that alliance, it would put a lot of people in danger. Sarah closed the laptop. Ronan's not perfect. He keeps secrets. He manipulates situations to his advantage, but he wasn't selling you out. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't. But ask yourself, if Ronan wanted you captured, why fight at the mill? Why send his people to help extract Danny? Why risk his own neck standing between you and Marcus's enforcers? Sarah's voice was hard. He's been protecting you, Kael, in his own controlling, alpha-shaped way. And yeah, maybe he should have been more upfront about it. But cutting him off over a fake video seems like a pretty stupid way to say thanks. The words stung because they were true. Kael had run without asking questions, without giving Ronan a chance to explain, had let his own paranoia and trust issues make the decision for him. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because Ronan's too proud to chase after you himself. And because right now, with Marcus escalating and someone obviously trying to drive a wedge between you two, we need you working together, not tearing each other apart. Sarah stood. So here's the deal. I go back and tell Ronan you're not interested in hearing his side. You disappear into the wilderness with your wolf pack and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Or you come back, listen to what he has to say, and maybe, just maybe, help us shut down Marcus before he turns this entire territory into his personal kingdom. That's not my fight, isn't it? Marcus wants you. He's not going to stop. And the longer you run, the more people get hurt. Danny almost died because Marcus needed leverage. How many more Dannys before you decide to stand your ground? Kyle's hands clenched into fists. She was right, and he hated it. Running hadn't solved anything. It had just delayed the inevitable confrontation while putting everyone around him at risk. If I come back, he said slowly, I want the truth. All of it. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Ronan tells me everything or I walk. Fair enough. I'll let him know. Sarah picked up her bag. One more thing. Marcus isn't your only problem. Whoever sent you that fake video wants you and Ronan at each other's throats. They're still out there, still watching. So maybe think about who benefits from you two being enemies. She left without waiting for a response. She left without, disappearing into the forest with the kind of efficiency that said she'd done this 100 times before. Kyle stood there. The wolves gathered around him and tried to think. Who benefited? Marcus, obviously. Easier to capture Kyle if he didn't have Ronan's resources backing him. But the video felt too sophisticated for Marcus's usual tactics. The Alpha preferred brute force over manipulation. So who else? Who had the technical skills, the access to Ronan's security footage, and the motivation to tear them apart? The answer hit him like a punch. There was someone at the mill who'd been conspicuously absent from the fighting. Someone who'd hung back, who'd had clear sightlines to everything. One of Sarah's team, a younger guy with nervous energy and too much interest in his phone. Kael pulled out his own phone and called Sarah back. She answered on the second ring. Change your mind already? Your team, the guy with the dark jacket and the tactical vest. What's his name? A pause. Why? Just tell me.
Carter. Why? What about him? Where is he now? Another pause, longer this time. Then Sarah's voice turned sharp. He said he had to take a call. Walked off about 10 minutes ago. Cale, what's going on? I think he's the leak. I think he's been feeding information to Marcus or someone else and using his access to you and Ronan to do it. Sarah swore creatively. Stay where you are. I'll handle it. No, if he's the leak,
He knows I'm at the fire tower. He'll report back, and Marcus will send people. Cale was already moving, the wolves falling into formation around him. I'm heading to Ronan's. Meet me there. He hung up and ran. The forest blurred past as he pushed his body harder than he should have with injured ribs and a barely healed shoulder. But adrenaline and fear made excellent painkillers, and the wolves kept pace effortlessly. Through the bond, he could sense other animals tracking his movement, deer veering away, birds taking flight, predators watching from a distance. The entire forest seemed aware of him now, attuned to his presence in a way that should have been impossible. He was maybe a mile from Ronan's property when the wolves suddenly stopped, hackles raised. Kyle froze, every sense straining. Then he heard it. Engines, multiple vehicles, moving fast on the road ahead. He pushed through the underbrush and saw them, 3 SUVs bearing Marcus's pack insignia, heading toward Ronan's estate. They were going to attack while Kyle was gone, while Ronan thought he was alone. Kyle didn't think. He just acted. The power surged up and he let it, throwing open every mental door he'd been keeping locked. The call went out, not to dozens of animals this time, but to hundreds. Every creature within 2 miles felt it, that irresistible pull toward him, toward protection, toward violence if necessary. They came. Wolves erupted from the forest, dozens of wild packs converging. Bears lumbered out of their dens. Mountain lions descended from the ridges. Even smaller animals, foxes, badgers, raccoons, answered the call. The forest itself seemed to come alive, every creature bound to Kyle's will. He stood in the middle of the road, this scraggly 23-year-old exile with a dislocated shoulder and trust issues, backed by an army of teeth and claws and primal fury. The SUVs screeched to a halt, doors opened. Marcus's enforcers piled out, weapons raised, but they stopped when they saw what waited for them. 100 pairs of eyes reflecting in the headlights. A growl that seemed to come from the forest itself. The lead enforcer, the same one from the clearing, raised his hand slowly. Varen, we don't want trouble. Then turn around and leave. Can't do that. Marcus gave orders. Marcus isn't here. I am. And everything in this forest answers to me. Cale took a step forward, and the animals moved with him, a living tide. So here's how this works. You get back in your vehicles. You drive away. You tell Marcus that if he sends anyone else, I won't be so polite. He'll just come himself. Good. I'm tired of dealing with his errand boys. The enforcer looked at his team, at the animals, at Kyle standing there with absolute certainty burning in his eyes. Whatever he saw made the decision for him. Mount up, he said to his people. We're leaving. They retreated to the SUVs and drove away, tires kicking up gravel. Kyle held the animals in place until the vehicles disappeared, then slowly released his hold. The creatures dispersed, melting back into the forest, though he could feel them lingering close, watching, waiting. His legs shook as the adrenaline drained away. That had been reckless and dangerous and probably stupid, but it had worked. He'd faced down Marcus's people and sent them running without a single blow thrown. The sound of an approaching vehicle made him tense again, but it was just Ronan's SUV. It pulled up and Ronan got out, his expression unreadable. Sarah called, Ronan said. Told me you were coming back. Told me about Carter, too. We're handling it. But she didn't mention you'd be staging a one-man blockade in the middle of the road. Technically, it was a several hundred animal blockade. That's not better. It worked. Ronan moved closer, and Kyle could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he was holding himself, like he wasn't sure if Kyle would bolt again or stay. I saw the video, Ronan said quietly. The real one and the fake. I know what you thought. Sarah explained, said you were protecting someone else, not selling me out. I wasn't. I wouldn't. Ronan's jaw tightened. But I should have told you I'd been looking into your background. Should have been honest about the fact that I knew who you were before I found you in that storm. I didn't know how to explain without making it sound exactly like what you feared. So tell me now, the truth. All of it. Ronan nodded slowly. 3 months ago, a kid showed up at my office. 16 years old, beaten half to death, begging for help getting away from Marcus's pack. Said Marcus was forcing young shifters to fight in underground matches for money and territory. I helped him get out, found him a safe place with a pack down south. But in the process, I started investigating Marcus's operation. And found out about me. Found out he'd exiled someone with unusual abilities 6 years ago. Someone he suddenly seemed very interested in bringing back. Ronan's voice was steady. I didn't seek you out, Kael. But when I saw that crash, when I recognized your name from the registration, I made a choice to get involved, to protect you if I could.
Why? What do you get out of it? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I saw someone who'd been hurt by the same kind of alpha I've spent my life opposing. Maybe I just wanted to prove Marcus doesn't get to control everyone. Ronan met his eyes. Or maybe I saw someone worth protecting for no reason other than they deserved it. Kael's throat felt tight. I don't trust easily. I know. And I don't like being manipulated, even with good intentions. I know that too. But I also know I can't fight Marcus alone. And whether I like it or not, you've been the only person in 6 years who stood between me and the people trying to hurt me. Kael took a breath. So here's what I need. No more secrets, no more investigating me behind my back. You want to know something, you ask. And I get to decide what I share. Deal. And if this is some long con to control me the way Marcus wants to, I will turn every animal in this forest against you and there won't be enough left to identify. Ronan's mouth curved slightly. That's fair. Okay, then I'm in. But we do this my way. Which is, we stop reacting and start attacking. Marcus wants me? Fine. Let him come. But not on his terms. On mine. Kael felt the power humming under his skin, ready and waiting. I'm done running. Time to make him regret he ever let me go. The plan came together over the next 3 days. Ronan had resources, contacts in other packs, allies in the human world, information networks that made Kael's head spin. But Kael had something Ronan didn't, the complete loyalty of every wild animal in the territory. They divided the work. Ronan handled the political side, reaching out to other alphas who were tired of Marcus's expansion, building a coalition. Kael handled reconnaissance, sending his wolves through Marcus's territory to map patrol patterns and identify weaknesses. What they found was damning. Marcus wasn't just consolidating power. He was preparing for war, stockpiling weapons, training combat units, building alliances with human criminal organizations. He was planning something big, and Kael was meant to be the centerpiece. He wants to use you to expand into the northern wilderness, Ronan explained, pointing to a map spread across his dining table. There's unclaimed territory up there, national forest, protected lands. No pack has ever controlled it because it's too wild, too unpredictable. But with your power, I could pacify it, make it safe for occupation. Kael felt sick. That's why he changed his mind about the exile. He realized I wasn't just a threat. I was a tool. A weapon, Sarah corrected. She'd been working with them since Carter's arrest. The young operative had indeed been selling information to Marcus, though his motivation turned out to be money rather than ideology, the kind that could shift the entire balance of power in the region. So we stop him before he gets that far, Kael said. How? Sarah asked. Marcus has 50 enforcers, weapons, resources. Even with your animals, it's going to be a bloodbath. Not if we make him come to us. Ronan looked at him sharply. Explain. Kael tapped the map where Marcus's main compound sat in the valley. He thinks I'm dangerous but unstable, thinks I can't control my power, that I'll eventually self-destruct or get captured. So we let him keep thinking that. We stage something, a show of force that looks spectacular but sloppy. Make him think I'm losing control, becoming more liability than asset. And when he comes to collect you, we show him exactly what I can do when I'm not holding back, when I'm not afraid anymore. Kael's voice was hard. We show him what happens when you try to weaponize something wild. The ambush site they chose was a clearing 2 miles from Marcus's compound. Open ground, easy access, the kind of place where Marcus would feel like he had the advantage. Kale spent a day preparing it, laying down connections to every animal in a 5-mile radius. Not controlling them yet, just making them aware, keeping the threads ready to pull. Ronan brought his people, Sarah and a dozen others, all veterans of pack conflicts. They positioned themselves in the trees, armed and ready but with strict orders not to engage unless Kyle gave the signal. And then they waited. The message they'd sent Marcus was simple. Kyle wanted to negotiate, wanted to discuss terms for ending the conflict without bloodshed. It was exactly the kind of reasonable, civilized approach that Marcus would never believe, which made it perfect bait. He came at sunset, the sky bleeding red and gold through the trees. 20 enforcers surrounded him, all armed, all alert. Marcus himself looked older than Kale remembered, harder, like the last 6 years had carved away anything soft. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, eyes scanning for traps. Kyle Varen, you've grown. So have you, more paranoid at least. Kale stood alone in the center of the clearing, his wolves visible behind him. Brought an army to a negotiation? Says the man with a pack of wild animals at his back. They're here for my protection, same as your people. Marcus smiled, cold and certain. We both know that's not true. You can't control them, Kyle. Not really. Any day now, they'll turn on you. That's what wild things do. Maybe. Or maybe I understand them better than you think. Understanding and control aren't the same thing. That's why you need the pack, structure, discipline, someone to guide that power before it destroys you. Is that what you do? Guide me? I'd teach you, the way your old alpha should have, before he made the mistake of casting you out. Marcus took a step forward. Come back to the pack, Kale. Accept my authority, and I'll give you everything you should have had. Status, purpose, a place to belong. In exchange for what? Using my power to conquer territory you can't hold on your own? In exchange for survival, because the alternative is being hunted for the rest of your life by people who'll use you and discard you the moment you're no longer convenient. The words were aimed at Ronan, Kale realized. Marcus was trying to drive the wedge deeper, make Kale doubt his alliance. Ronan's not using me, Kale said. Isn't he? Ask yourself why he really stepped in, what he gains from having someone with your abilities in his debt. Kale felt rather than saw Ronan tense in his hiding spot. This was the moment, the point where doubt could crack everything open. But Kyle had already made his choice. You're right, he said. Ronan probably does benefit from helping me. Most relationships work that way, mutual advantage. But there's a difference between alliance and ownership. He's never tried to control me, never demanded obedience, never threatened people I care about to force compliance. Kale's voice hardened. You, on the other hand, beat a mechanic half to death just to get me to show up. So no, Marcus. I'm not coming back. Not now. Not ever. Marcus's expression went cold. Then you've made your choice. He raised his hand and the enforcers moved forward, weapons coming up. This was it, the moment of truth. Kale closed his eyes and pulled every thread at once. The forest exploded. Animals poured from every direction in numbers that defied belief. Wolves, bears, mountain lions, elk, deer, birds, everything that walked or flew or crawled. Hundreds of them, all converging on the clearing with singular purpose. Not attacking yet, just surrounding, cutting off escape routes, creating a living wall of teeth and claws. Marcus's enforcers froze, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of what they were facing. This wasn't a pack, this was an ecosystem, and it answered to Kyle. You wanted to see control, Kyle said, opening his eyes. The power burned through him like wildfire, but it didn't hurt. It felt right. Here it is. Every creature in this forest knows me, trusts me, follows me. Not because I'm forcing them, but because I'm one of them in a way you'll never understand. Marcus stared, and for the first time, Kyle saw real fear in the alpha's eyes. You can't maintain this, Marcus said, but his voice shook. It'll tear you apart, maybe, but it'll tear through you first. Kyle took a step forward and the animals moved with him,
a coordinated advance that made Marcus's enforcers back up despite their weapons. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, take your people, go back to your compound, and stay there. And if I ever hear about you trying to expand territory, forcing young shifters to fight, or coming after anyone under my protection again, I will bury you under so much wilderness you'll never find your way out. You think you can threaten me?
I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you how this ends if you push me. Kael's voice dropped. I spent 6 years being afraid of this power, afraid of what it could do, what it made me. But I'm not afraid anymore, and that should terrify you. For a long moment, Marcus just stood there. Then slowly, he nodded to his enforcers. They lowered their weapons and began backing toward their vehicles. Marcus was the last to leave. He looked at Kael one final time, something like respect mixed with the fear. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. Marcus climbed into his SUV and drove away. The enforcers followed, and as soon as they were gone, Kael released his hold on the animals. They dispersed immediately, returning to their territories, their dens, their lives. Kael's legs gave out and he sat down hard in the dirt. The power receded, leaving him hollow and shaking, but also strangely calm. He'd done it. He'd faced down the alpha who'd haunted him for 6 years and won. Ronan emerged from the trees and sat down beside him. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both. Are you okay? Kael laughed, surprising himself. I have no idea, but I'm still here. That counts for something. It counts for everything. Ronan's voice was quiet. What you did, controlling that many animals at once, holding that kind of power without losing yourself, most people couldn't do that. Most people wouldn't even try. I'm not most people. No, you're really not. They sat there as night fell, the forest settling around them. Somewhere in the distance, Kael's wolves howled, not a threat, just acknowledgement. A pack recognizing its leader. For the first time in 6 years, Kael Varen wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending to be less than he was. He was exactly where he needed to be. And Marcus, along with everyone else who'd ever underestimated him, was about to learn what that meant. Marcus didn't wait 3 days before making his move. He waited 18 hours. Kael was asleep in Ronan's guest room when the gray wolf's howl jolted him awake. Not a normal howl. This one was urgent, alarmed, threaded with warning that shot straight through the bond and into Kael's consciousness like a knife. He was on his feet and moving before his brain fully caught up, grabbing clothes with one hand while reaching out through the bond with his mind. What he found made his blood run cold. Marcus's compound was emptying. Every enforcer, every fighter, every resource the Alpha had, all mobilizing and heading toward Ronan's territory. Not in stealth, not with strategy. This was a full assault, the kind you launched when you'd stopped caring about subtlety and decided to solve your problems with overwhelming force. Kael yanked open the bedroom door and nearly collided with Ronan, who was already dressed and moving fast down the hallway. You felt it too? Ronan asked. My wolves did. Marcus is coming. Everyone he's got. I know. I've got alerts on his compound. Ronan's jaw was tight. He's not just coming for you anymore. He's coming for all of us. He's going to make an example. How long do we have? 20 minutes? Maybe less? 20 minutes? Not enough time to run, not enough time to fortify. Barely enough time to prepare for what was coming. Kael's mind raced through options and discarded them just as fast. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and about to face an alpha who decided that controlling Kael wasn't worth the trouble anymore. Better to eliminate the threat entirely. We need to evacuate, Sarah said, appearing from another room with a rifle already in hand. Get Kael somewhere safe and regroup. No. The word came out harder than Kael intended. I'm not running again. If Marcus wants a war, let's give him one. Against 50 enforcers? That's suicide. Not if I use everything I've got. Ronan grabbed Kael's shoulder, forcing eye contact. What are you talking about? The animals. All of them. Not just the ones nearby. Every creature in this entire territory. I can call them. Hold them. Use them the way Marcus wanted to use me. Kael's voice was steady, despite the fear churning in his gut. I can turn this whole mountain into a battlefield he can't win. That kind of power draw will destroy you. You barely held it together in the clearing, and that was just a demonstration. Then I guess I'd better not lose control. Kyle, I'm doing this, with or without you. Kale pulled away, but I'd rather it be with you. For a moment, Ronan just looked at him, something unreadable moving behind those sharp eyes. Then he nodded. Okay, we do this together, but we do it smart. The plan came together in fragments, shouted between rooms as they armed themselves and prepared the house. Sarah and her team would take defensive positions around the property, using the terrain and Ronan's security systems to their advantage. Ronan would coordinate with his contacts in other packs, calling in whatever support they could muster on short notice. And Kale would do what he did best, become something no one could predict or control. By the time Marcus's convoy appeared on the road, everything was ready. Kyle stood in the clearing in front of Ronan's house, his wolves arrayed behind him, and opened himself completely to the power he'd spent 6 years suppressing. It rushed in like a flood, vast and overwhelming and absolutely certain. Through it he felt every living thing for miles, thousands of animals, each one a separate thread of awareness, each one responding to his call. Come, he told them, not with words, but with something deeper, pure intention, pure need. Come and fight with me. They came. The forest came alive with movement. Wolves poured from every direction, packs both wild and half-feral converging on the property. Bears emerged from their territories, massive and aggressive. Mountain lions descended from the high peaks. Elk and deer crashed through the underbrush, their usual fear replaced with something fierce. Even smaller animals answered, foxes, badgers, raccoons, birds darkening the sky in wheeling flocks. Marcus's convoy slowed as they saw what waited for them. The lead vehicle stopped about 100 yards from the house. Doors opened and enforcers spilled out, weapons raised. But even from this distance, Kyle could see their hesitation. Marcus himself emerged last, and even he looked shaken by the sheer scope of what Kyle had assembled. This wasn't just using animals as tools. This was binding an entire ecosystem to his will, turning wilderness into weapon. Kyle Varen, Marcus's voice carried across the clearing. This is your last chance. Stand down and come with us peacefully. No one else has to die. Kale stepped forward, the animals moving with him in perfect synchronization. You're right. No one has to die. You can leave, right now. Take your people and go. And this ends. You know I can't do that. Then you know what happens next. Marcus raised his hand and the enforcers opened fire. The sound was deafening, automatic weapons tearing into the clearing, bullets meant to scatter the animals and cut down anything that moved. But Kyle was ready. He'd spent the last few days learning to feel the forest as one living system, to move creatures with the same unconscious ease as moving his own limbs. The animals scattered and reformed, flowing around the gunfire like water around stones. Wolves darted in from the flanks, too fast to track. Birds dove at the enforcers' faces, claws and beaks finding exposed skin. Bears charged from the tree line, scattering the defensive formation. It was chaos, but controlled chaos. Kyle could feel every movement, every attack, every shift in the battle. And underneath it all, the power burning through him like he'd swallowed the sun. Ronan's people opened fire from the house, providing cover while Sarah coordinated their defense over comm units. The enforcers tried to advance but couldn't maintain formation against the sheer number of animals hitting them from every angle. Marcus pulled back to one of the SUVs and grabbed what looked like a military-grade grenade launcher. Kale saw it a second too late to stop him from firing. The grenade hit the ground 20 feet from the house and exploded in a ball of flame and shrapnel. 2 of Sarah's team went down. The windows on one side of the house shattered, and the blast spooked enough animals that Kyle felt his control slip, just for a second. But a second was all it took. One of the bears broke from his direction and went straight for an enforcer, not to threaten, but to kill. The man screamed as massive jaws closed around his shoulder, blood sprayed, and Kyle felt the bond shudder as the bear's predator instincts overrode his commands. No! Kale yanked the bear back with pure force of will, hauling it off the enforcer before it could finish what it started. The effort made his head split with pain, but he held on. Stand down, all of you. Stand down!
The animals froze, caught between their nature and his control. The enforcer scrambled away, clutching his mangled shoulder. And in that moment of hesitation, Marcus saw his opening. "There!" he shouted to his people. "He can't hold them! Push harder, and he'll break!" The enforcers rallied, pouring more fire into the clearing. Not at the animals this time. At Kyle directly. They'd figured out that he was the linchpin, cut him down, and the whole defense collapsed. Ronan appeared beside Kyle, returning fire with a handgun, his body positioned to shield Kyle from the worst of it. "You need to let some of them go. You're trying to control too much at once. If I let go, people die. If you don't, we all die." A bullet whined past Kyle's head, close enough that he felt the air displacement. Another caught Ronan in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, and Kyle felt something in his chest crack open. Not physical damage, but something worse. The realization that this wasn't working, that holding this much power was tearing him apart, that he was about to lose everything, including the one person who'd stood with him. Marcus was advancing now, protected by his enforcers, some kind of heavy rifle in his hands. "Give up, Kyle, you can't win this." And the terrible thing was, he was right. Kale could feel the power slipping, his control fraying at the edges. The animals were getting confused, aggressive, starting to fight each other as much as the enforcers. He was losing it. Then Ronan grabbed his hand. "Look at me," Ronan said, blood soaking through his shirt, but his voice steady. "You don't have to do this alone. I don't know how to share this. It doesn't work that way." "Then make it work." Ronan's grip tightened. "I'm an alpha. I know how to coordinate, how to lead. You've got the power, but you're trying to micromanage everything. Let me help carry the weight." It was insane. The bond Kyle had with the animals wasn't something you could just hand off to someone else. It was personal, instinctive, woven into who he was at a fundamental level. But looking at Ronan, bleeding and defiant and absolutely certain, Kale made a choice. He opened the bond wider and pulled Ronan in. The connection formed differently than with the animals. Instead of control, it was partnership. Ronan's alpha instincts slotted into place beside Kyle's power like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. Where Kyle had been trying to direct every single creature, Ronan's presence created structure, hierarchy, organization. The animals responded immediately. They formed into actual units, packs working in coordination, birds and ground creatures supporting each other, everything moving with military precision instead of chaotic fury. Kyle felt the pressure on his mind ease as Ronan took over the tactical coordination, leaving Kyle free to maintain the raw power connection. It wasn't perfect. The bond between them was rough and improvised, nothing like what either of them had experienced before. But it worked. Marcus's advance stalled as the animals hit his forces with renewed coordination. Enforcers went down under precise strikes. Vehicles were surrounded and disabled. The convoy that had looked so overwhelming minutes ago was now fragmented and struggling. Marcus himself stood in the middle of it all, his rifle empty, watching his plan disintegrate. When his eyes met Kyle's across the clearing, what Kale saw there wasn't anger, it was understanding. The Alpha had finally realized what he was really facing. Not just an exile with unusual powers, not a weapon to be controlled or a threat to be eliminated, but something entirely new, a partnership between Alpha authority and wild power that had never existed before. "Fall back!" Marcus shouted to his people. "Disengage! Now!" The enforcers didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled for their vehicles, dragging wounded with them, abandoning equipment in their rush to retreat. Within minutes, the clearing was empty except for the devastation they'd left behind. Kyle let the animals go gradually, releasing them in waves rather than all at once. They dispersed into the forest, returning to their territories, most of them unmarked despite the battle. The bond with Ronan loosened but didn't break entirely. It settled into something ambient, a background awareness of each other that felt strange but not unwelcome. "You're bleeding," Kyle said, focusing on Ronan. "So are you." Kale touched his face and his hand came away red. He hadn't even felt the cuts from flying debris. "We should probably do something about that." "Probably." But Ronan was smiling, fierce and bright. "We won. We survived. That's not the same thing." "Today it is." Sarah appeared from the house, limping but alive. We've got 2 wounded, but no fatalities. Marcus left behind 3 disabled vehicles and enough weapons to supply a small army, and I'm getting calls from every pack within 100 miles wanting to know what the hell just happened. Tell them the truth, Kyle said. Tell them Marcus started a war he couldn't finish. Over the next week, the story spread. Not the sanitized version that alphas usually preferred, but the raw truth. Kyle Varen, the exile everyone had written off, had faced down Marcus Thorne's entire force and sent them running. More than that, he'd done it by forging an alliance that shouldn't have been possible, combining wild power with alpha structure to create something neither could achieve alone. Packs started reaching out, not to capture or control Kyle, but to negotiate, to understand, to explore what this new dynamic might mean for territories where wild and pack lands overlapped. Marcus's power base crumbled. Enforcers defected. Smaller packs he'd been controlling declared independence. His human allies quietly severed ties. Within days, he'd retreated to his compound and barricaded himself in, too weakened to threaten anyone. 3 weeks after the battle, Kale stood in that same clearing and watched as representatives from 9 different packs gathered to discuss a new territorial agreement. Not expansion, not conquest, cooperation, shared resources, protection for exiles who didn't fit traditional pack structure, recognition that the wildlands weren't something to be conquered but something to coexist with. It was Ronan's idea, though he insisted Kale had to be the one to broker it. They need to see you as a leader, not just my associate, Ronan had said. This only works if they respect what you've built. What he'd built. Kale still wasn't sure what to call it. Not a pack. The wolves that stayed with him were wild, choosing to follow rather than being bound by pack law. Not a territory in the traditional sense. He didn't own the forest. He was part of it. Something new. Something that didn't have a name yet. The meeting was tense at first. Alphas didn't like changing the rules they'd spent generations establishing. But one by one, Kyle made his case. Showed them that protecting the wildlands benefited everyone. That exiles with unusual abilities weren't threats if they had safe places to go. That the old ways of doing things, dominance and control and rigid hierarchy, were failing. The vote wasn't unanimous. 2 alphas walked out, unwilling to compromise. But 7 stayed, and 7 was enough to start building something. By the time the sun set, they had a framework. Neutral territories where exiles could settle without pack interference. Shared defense agreements for wild lands. A council system where disputes could be resolved without violence. It wasn't perfect, but it was a foundation. As the alphas left, Ronan joined Kyle by the tree line. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last vehicles disappear down the mountain road. You know this changes everything, Ronan said finally. I know. There will be pushback, alphas who refuse to accept it, territories that want to maintain the old ways. Let them. Kyle's voice was quiet but certain. I spent 6 years being afraid of what I was, trying to hide it, pretending to be less. I'm done with that. If they want to challenge what we're building, they're welcome to try. We. Ronan glanced at him. That's new. Yeah, well, turns out I'm not as good at the lone wolf thing as I thought. Kale managed a small smile. Besides, someone needs to keep you from making deals behind my back. That was one time. That we know of. Ronan laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine and nothing like the controlled alpha Kyle had first met in the storm. Fair point. They started walking back toward the house. Kale's wolves fell into step around them, the gray pressing close enough that Kale could rest a hand on his head. Through the bond, the one with the animals and the quieter one with Ronan, he could feel the forest settling into its evening rhythms. Peaceful. Balanced. What happens now? Kale asked. Now we build, slowly, carefully, probably with a lot of setbacks and arguments, but we build something better than what came before. You make it sound simple. It's not, but nothing worth doing is. Ronan paused at the house's entrance. You could leave, you know. Now that Marcus isn't a threat, now that you've got packs willing to work with you, you could go anywhere. Build your own territory. You don't have to stay here. Kale considered that. A month ago, he would have jumped at the chance. Freedom, independence, no strings attached. But a lot had changed in a month. Where would I go? He said. Everything I've built is here, the wolves, the connections with the wild packs, this whole insane experiment in cooperation. And besides, he met Ronan's eyes. I think we work better together than apart. Something shifted in Ronan's expression, something warm and a little vulnerable that alphas weren't supposed to show. Yeah, I think we do. Inside, Sarah had dinner ready. Nothing fancy, just stew and bread, but it felt like celebration anyway. They ate around Ronan's large dining table, Sarah telling increasingly exaggerated versions of the battle while her team interjected corrections. Kale's wolves sprawled on the floor, content and well-fed. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Kyle felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Later, after everyone else had gone to bed, Kyle stood by the windows looking out at the forest. His forest now, in a way that had nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with connection. He could feel it breathing, living, existing in harmony with his presence rather than in spite of it. Can't sleep? Ronan joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. Too much going on in my head. Kale accepted the tea gratefully. I keep thinking about everything that happened. The crash, meeting you, Marcus, all of it. 6 years I spent running, and in less than a month, everything changed. Regret it? No, but it's a lot to process. Kale was quiet for a moment. I spent so long thinking I was broken, that what I could do was wrong, dangerous, something that needed to be hidden or suppressed. And now it's the foundation of something new. Yeah, it's weird.
Weird good or weird bad? Kale smiled. Weird good, mostly. I'm still figuring it out. That makes 2 of us. Ronan set his mug down. I've spent my life being the controlled one, the alpha who had everything planned, who never made impulsive decisions. And then you showed up and turned all of that upside down. Sorry? Don't be. I needed it. Ronan's voice was soft. You reminded me why I started fighting alphas like Marcus in the first place.
It wasn't about territory or power. It was about protecting people who didn't fit into the system. People like you. People like us? Kyle corrected. They stood there as the moon rose over the mountains, painting everything silver. Somewhere in the forest, Kyle's wolves howled, not in warning, but in acknowledgement. Other wolves answered from different territories, wild and pack both, creating a chorus that spoke of new alliances and old instincts finding common ground. The next morning brought more visitors. A young shifter from Marcus's old pack looking for sanctuary. 2 exiles who'd heard about the neutral territories and wanted to know if they were real. A human researcher studying wolf behavior who'd heard impossible stories about a man who could speak to wild animals and wanted to know if it was true. Kyle spent hours talking to them, explaining what they were trying to build, making it clear that this wasn't a traditional pack with traditional rules. Some left disappointed, others stayed, cautiously hopeful. And slowly, carefully, something began to take shape. Within a month, they had 12 exiles living on Ronan's property. Within 2, they'd established 3 neutral settlement zones where people who didn't fit pack structure could live without fear. Within 3, 2 more alpha packs had joined their coalition. It wasn't perfect. There were fights over resources, disagreements about boundaries, moments when Kyle wondered if they were building something sustainable or just delaying the inevitable collapse. But they kept working at it, kept adjusting, kept proving that there was another way. Marcus tried one last assault 6 months later, hiring human mercenaries to hit their settlements. It failed spectacularly. Kyle's warning system, a network of animals spanning hundreds of miles, gave them advance notice. And the mercenaries found themselves facing not just shifters, but an entire ecosystem that treated them as invaders. After that, Marcus disappeared. Some said he'd left the territory entirely, too broken to rebuild. Others claimed he was still out there, planning something. Kale didn't particularly care. Marcus had lost the only thing that mattered to an alpha: respect. Whatever he did now, he'd do it without power. A year after the crash that should have killed him, Kyle stood in a valley that had once been disputed territory and watched as representatives from 23 packs signed an agreement establishing permanent neutral zones. It wasn't everything they'd hoped for. Some alphas still refused to participate, still maintained the old ways. But it was enough. Enough to prove that change was possible. Enough to give exiles hope. enough to start rebuilding the relationship between packlands and wilderness into something that benefited both. Ronan stood beside him, no longer just an ally, but a partner in the truest sense. They'd formalized it 3 months ago in a ceremony that borrowed from pack tradition, but created something new, a bond between alpha and wild that had never existed before. Not ownership, not hierarchy, partnership. Equals choosing to build something together. "How does it feel?" Ronan asked, watching the alphas file out after the signing. "Being the one who changed everything?" "Terrifying," Kale admitted. "What if we're wrong? What if this all falls apart?" "Then we rebuild. That's what you do. You find a way forward even when everything's broken." Ronan's hand found Kael's. "Besides, you're not alone in this. Not anymore." Kale laced their fingers together, that simple contact grounding him in a way nothing else could. "No, not anymore." The wolves howled in the distance. His pack, though he'd never call it that. They'd grown from 5 to nearly 40, a mix of wild animals and shifters who'd been cast out from traditional packs, all choosing to follow someone who led by connection rather than dominance. It was strange and unprecedented and probably wouldn't have worked if Kael had tried to force it. But he hadn't forced anything. He'd just offered an alternative, a place where power didn't mean control, where being different wasn't a death sentence, where wilderness and civilization could coexist instead of constantly fighting for dominance. Some called it revolutionary. Others called it dangerous. Kael just called it necessary, because the world was changing whether the old alphas liked it or not. Climate shifts were pushing wild territories into packlands. Human expansion was forcing everyone to adapt. The rigid hierarchies that had worked for generations weren't working anymore. What Kael had built, what he and Ronan had built together, offered another path. Not easy, not simple, but possible. And that was enough. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Kael felt the bond with his wolves pulse steady and sure. Felt the connection to Ronan, that partnership that had saved both their lives and changed everything. Felt the forest itself, vast and wild and no longer something to fear. He'd started as an outcast, rejected by his pack and marked as wrong from birth. He'd spent 6 years running, hiding, trying to survive in a world that had no place for someone like him. But he'd ended up here, standing in a valley surrounded by wolves, beside an alpha who'd chosen partnership over power. Watching as the very structure of pack society began to shift towards something more inclusive. Not because he was perfect, not because he'd followed the rules, but because he'd refused to keep pretending he was something he wasn't. Because he'd stopped running and started building. Because when the storm came, literally and metaphorically, he'd survived it. And in surviving, he'd proven that there was another way to live, another way to lead, another way to be powerful without being destructive. The wolves howled again, and this time Kael howled with them, a sound of triumph and belonging and absolute certainty that whatever came next, he'd face it the same way he'd faced everything else. Not alone, not anymore. With his pack at his side, his partner at his back, and the wilderness itself answering his call. Kael Varen, the outcast who became something no one could have predicted, the exile who built a new world from the ashes of the old one, the wild thing who finally came home.